Hey everybody, this is Sarah with Snuggle Extension. Today I'm going to show you a cutting technique that's going to save you some time. Cutting is one of the parts of making a quilt that just seems to take a really long time, but we're going to do it a little bit faster this way. So if you're beginners, nobody may have ever showed you this, so I'm going to show you now. So what we're going to use today, I've got a self-healing cutting mat, and this one is 18 by 24. That's a good size for this. Those gigantic kitchen table size cutting mats that you see a lot of people using are great, but I know a lot of people probably don't have those. And this is one that you can take around to different places without having to have necessarily a dedicated space for your cutting. So we're going to use this today, 18 inches by 24 inches. And for our rulers, I'm going to show you one technique that uses this 12.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. And then another one where we're going to use the 6 by 24 ruler. They both have 1/4 inch increments marked for us. We've also got our rotary cutter. And I've got about a yard of fabric here that I've already pressed so that it can give us more accurate cuts. So one of the quilts that I get the most requests for is actually a simple squares quilt that's got a lot of floral prints on it. And the pieces for that quilt, when you cut them, are actually cut as 10-inch squares. So if I were to write a pattern for this quilt, I would say to cut 10-inch strips along the width of the fabric and subcut 10-inch squares. So when we talk about the width of the fabric, that's the part that's measured from selvage edge to selvage edge. So what your selvage edge is this part on the end of the fabric. A lot of times it's a different texture than the rest of the fabric. Sometimes it has writing in it, so like you might see some of the manufacturer's information. Some of it has those little colored dots, and what those are for is to help you coordinate your threads and your other fabrics. So to cut 10-inch strips along the width of the fabric and subcut 10-inch squares, we're not going to cut the strip and then lay the whole strip out and cut the squares one at a time. We're actually going to start, for the first technique I'm going to show you, we're going to cut 4 at a time. And then after that, I'll show you how you can cut 8 at a time. This works great if you're, for the 10-inch squares, it works out perfectly if your width of fabric is at least 42 inches. If you're under 42 inches, it's probably going to be cutting a little bit too close for this. So we're going to start by folding this fabric in half, selvage edge to selvage edge. So I'm matching up those selvages and folding that fabric in half. And you want to match up your selvages really good so that you don't end up having your pieces be a little too small. Then flatten that out. And once that's flattened out, we're going to fold that over one more time and match that up with that other edge. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to be nice and neat. So we're going to start, and I'm just going to kind of fold this up here a little bit so it doesn't hang off the side of my table. But we're going to start by getting ourselves a nice edge on this side. So we're going to line this bottom line where that fabric is folded up with one of the lines on the mat. And that doesn't have to be perfect. It's just kind of to give us an idea what we're doing. Now I'm going to get my 12.5 inch ruler. Okay, so I'm just going to line one of the lines on my 12.5 inch ruler up with this bottom edge. And we're going to make sure when you do this, make sure, so kind of peel your fabric a little bit, make sure that where you put your ruler, you're going to be having where you cut your line. So if I put my ruler right here, where I cut my line, it needs to be where all this fabric is underneath it so that you make sure and have a good cut. So line that up. You do not necessarily have to look at the lines on your mat here with this technique. We're going to just put some firm pressure here, and I'm going to make this little cut. All right, so there we go. And we're going to peel this off and make sure I got the whole thing, and I did. So now, you don't have to look at the lines on your mat with this. We're just looking at the lines on a ruler. We're going to take that 10-inch line on our ruler, and we're going to line it up with this straight edge that we just made. Okay. So once you have that lined up, use your hand to hold some pressure on that ruler and make that little cut. Okay, so I'm going to just take this off to the side. We'll use it in a minute when I show you how to do the 8 at a time cuts. So now we have our 10" with the fabric strip. We're going to leave it just like that, and I'm just going to flip this mat around. Okay? Get our 12.5" ruler back, and you're going to line one of these bottom lines, one of these lines up with a bottom edge of your fabric. Now this is the line that we just squared off, so we know that it's a good line. So you want it to be to where that bottom line, the line is lined up with the bottom. Give yourself a little bit of ruler clearance at the top so that your rotary cutter doesn't veer off to the side at the end. And make sure that the 1" side here and the 10" side here is completely within this fabric. And make sure that it's not going over that selvage, because you don't want the selvage to be showing up in your quilt. So you'll just kind of make sure that this little fold here, that you're getting all the fabric there. Get that lined up. Make that cut. Okay, and when I take this apart, you see I've got 2 complete pieces, so I got everything I needed. Move my ruler for just a second. Then I'm just gonna leave that where it is and flip that mat around again. So this is actually kind of an advantage to having this smaller mat. We're gonna make it work to our advantage because it's a lot more portable. We can twirl that around like that. We're gonna do the same thing on this side. We're gonna get a bottom, one of these lines here, and line it up with this bottom edge of that fabric there. And then our 10" line over here will line up with this side. So I've got some ruler clearance at the top, the line lined up at the bottom, and the 10" line lined up here. And then, and you can see that I've got all 4 layers have plenty of clearance so that I'm making my squares as big as they need to. Get that lined up really good. And we're just gonna make that cut. So now we've got 4 squares, 4 10" squares, and they should be really accurate. And we cut 4 at a time. All right, so now I'll show you how to cut your 10" squares 8 at a time. So the first thing we're gonna do here, with this 8 at a time cutting technique, we will use the lines on our ruler a little bit more than we did with the first one. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna line up this bottom edge where we've got the folds along with one of the lines of your mat. It doesn't really matter which one. Just try to line that up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just try to line it up so your cuts won't be as wonky. And these are actually pretty well cut from where I just squared them off to cut the 4 at a time, but I'm gonna go ahead and square it off because that's what you would do if you were actually doing this. So we're gonna square it off starting at our 2" line. All right, so we're gonna start with our 12.5 by 12.5" ruler, and using the lines on our mat, we're gonna line that 1/2" mark up with the lines on our mat. And we've got the first line lined up with that. I've got it on the 2" mark on our mat. And then the lines on our ruler, this 1/2" mark is lining up there. Okay, so I'm gonna make that cut. All right, so that's got us a nice square edge that we can trust. And I'm going to line my 10" mark up with the side. So I'm going to line that 10" mark up with that side that I just cut. Hold some pressure and make that cut. All right, so we're going to move this ruler to the side for just a second, and I'm going to pull the mat over a little bit. And so we got a little quilt math to do. We started at the 2, so 2 plus 10 is 12. So we're gonna line the 10" line here up with the 12" mark on my cutting mat. And you can use these 1/2" increments to the sides to make sure. So if this 10" line is lining up, this 1/2" line is lining up, this line is lining up, then you're probably gonna get a pretty accurate cut. So I've got a cut to make here. All right, so I'm going to move this little bit of extra off to the side. So now that we have our two 10-inch width of fabric strips cut, we're going to use this portable cutting mat and we're going to carefully flip that around. And now we're going to cut both of these, this side and this side, and that'll give us 8 10-inch squares at a time. So let's look at the lines on my mat and where I've lined up. So I've lined up really close to that 3. So we're going to bump over a 1/2 inch from that 3, which will be 3.5. And 3.5 plus 10 is 13.5. So I need to make sure that where my 13.5 inch line is, if I'm going to do that 10 inches there, that it's not going to be running me into the selvage. And for this one, it's not. So we're going to start 3.5 inch line. So I'm going to line this side of my ruler up with the 3.5 inch line. You can also check, make sure that you have a line lined up with your bottom edge here and also with your top edge here. And you can use your other 1/2 inch lines to make sure that they're all lined up. Okay, so let's get started there. I'm going to hold some pressure and make that first little cut. All right, you see I have plenty of clearance on all 4 of these little strips. So that means that we didn't cut anything off of our 10-inch squares. We're going to carefully flip this around. So we've got this nice line here that we can trust. So we're at 3.5. So 3.5 plus 10 is 13.5. So I'm going to line this side of my ruler up with that 13.5 inch line. And you can use your other 1/2 inch increments to make sure they line up where they're supposed to be. And that'll help you make sure that you've got your ruler nice and lined up. And then make that cut. All right. So now we have 8 10-inch squares cut at a time. So I hope this helps you out. If you like this video, don't forget to, if the video helped you, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. Thank you.